computer. Yeah. Okay, we should be good there. Now I should be able to. Participants, huh? Okay, I can pull this down low. Slideshow, might as well hit that. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay. 10:30 already. Well, welcome everybody to Contemporary Issues. We're getting close to Easter, Palm Sunday. Next Sunday? Two more to go. We're getting close, though. So Steve is out today. He'll be back next time. And Mike just asked me how I picked this subject. So I think it's because I grew up in Cincinnati in a suburb section that was heavily Catholic. In fact, when I met kids, teenagers, they would often ask me, what parish do you go to? And my answer was always, well, I'm not Catholic, but if I was, I'd be in the St. Teresa parish. And but of course, we had a very interesting community. It was balanced about 50-50 between Catholic and non-Catholic. Half the kids went to the public school, half went to the private school or the Catholic parochial school. And it always brought up some interesting issues relative to dating and relationships too. There was always a certain tension. You can't go to your church and you can go to ours, and those kind of things. I also saw 2 streets up from 2 houses up from me was a very wonderful Catholic couple. They were divorced and remarried, but they'd kind of been pushed aside by the church, and they were hurt pretty badly by it. And as a kid growing up, I could never quite understand why they'd been, pushed away and hurt so badly. So I think those are some of the issues that brought up the subject. It's a very touchy subject, and I want to make it perfectly clear this morning that I'm not here attacking anybody's church. And we're going to talk about, because frankly, almost all churches have some degree of difficulty dealing with the issues of not so much marriage, but divorce. Although you could argue we're having trouble in our Methodist faith now dealing with marriage in terms of who's allowed to get married and who isn't. So we'll try to be respectful, but hopefully it'll bring up some good discussion. Before I yak anymore, do we have any guests or first timers here this morning? Okay. 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 So hopefully we can be open this morning. Again, we're not trying to offend or attack anybody. Particularly, I noticed I was particularly proud of the Pope this week. He's really made some emboldened statements regarding his condemnation of the invasion of Ukraine and he called it an infantile war. And he also personally went to the Russian ambassador, I believe, in Rome to express his discomfort with what was happening. And that had never happened before, I think, in the history of the church. Pope not, instead of sending a rep to go talk to an ambassador or something, actually going out there. So we're going to hit, again, a touchy subject. And I have many wonderful Catholic friends that I cherish. So we're not here to attack their faith, nor the Jewish faith, nor our faith, or anybody else's. But it's just a difficult subject. And it brings up a lot of hurt in people in general, the issue of divorce, simply because it's one of the most painful things that can happen in a person's life. It often and usually does affect them for a long, long time. And it's a hurtful subject. It's not an easy one to deal with. Hopefully we can talk about it in a mature way. There's a couple books dealing with divorce. One published by the Latter-day Saint faith, Beauty for Ashes, and then the one on the right from the Catholic Church. Let's see, get to the next screen. Fire. That particular book, and I haven't read that book. I did look. That's one I haven't read, Mike. That I simply looked at it. But many faiths tend to be patriarchal, and hence the subject of divorce tends to be, damaging to the women often. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. For those of you who have been driving around Littleton and Denver, you've probably seen pairs of geese, and you almost always see them in pairs. They apparently mate for life, and they get pretty close. We had a case, also bald eagles sort of mate for life, although we had an incident out here in Denver at one of the nature centers where there was a hussy that broke up a couple, a mated pair of bald eagles, took over the nest, and pushed. Okay, it was just one case. Yeah, but the newspaper said it was very uncommon among the eagles for this to have happened. But apparently, the one other female took over the nest and pushed out the other one, and was a home wrecker. Okay, and then an irreverent cartoon. God as a kid tries to make a chicken in his room. Maybe God didn't quite have everything put together when he figured out marriage and divorce. If you've ever gone online, if you want to hear a couple touching songs, Tammy Wynette sings two songs, and you can look at them on YouTube. One is I Don't Want to Play House, and another one that she spells out the word divorce. And these songs really hit hard, and are two of the most poignant songs you'll hear. Country music always often reaches for the heart, and she hits hard on these two songs. Okay, we're going to move quickly through divorce because we want to get into how churches deal with the subject. Is our main theme today. But here's a history of marriage from what it goes back to, is it 1800? You can see that's divorces per 1,000 people, and divorce was almost, an extreme rarity, even up to it was going up across the 1800s and into 1920, 1930. We see where you couldn't even afford to get a divorce there in the Depression. But then marriage and divorce started climbing heavily around 1940. And we see a huge amount of marriages right after World War II. And we also see a spike in divorces right after the war. Men came home to find that their relationships were largely, a lot of them had broken up. But then the good old 50s and 60s, the divorce rate goes down. Of course, the marriage rate also goes down. But then clearly we moved into a somewhat of a new era around 1970. We start seeing the marriage rate go up, the divorce rate go up. We're going to jump to the next curve. Marriage per thousand. We're going to look at the last 30 years from 1990. And again, that's marriages per thousand people. And we can see since 1990, and that scale is not 0 to 10, it's 6 to 10. We can still see that, whoa, things have been shifting in society, and the marriage rate is going down. The TV show was not entirely off the mark. Again, we're picking on women. Divorce rate per thousand married women, and we can see the divorce rate's not homogeneous. Red means more divorce, much higher rate of divorce. The paler color means a lower rate of divorce, and that's interesting. Where the above the Mason-Dixon line, there's a much lower divorce rate, and the South has a greater problem, and certainly across Appalachia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas, divorce. Huh, interesting. Yeah. But we're going to get into that. We've got a chart. On the lower right there is the states ranked by education. And we can see there is a pretty good correlation between degree of education in the state. In other words, as more people are complete high school, get educational training, the divorce rate does drop off. And it does correlate with lack of education.
You think that's because you're old?
That's part of it. And yeah, you're very right about one thing, Joe. We have to be careful about these statistics. We can often what seems to be a factor living in the state, it's not being in Oklahoma, it's often something else. Like it could be education, it could be environment, poverty. Poverty is an incredible influence on that. Looking at the divorce and marriage by rate, isn't that a mess? I'm trying to interpret it. But the blue dots are the marriage rate, and the orange dots are the divorce rate. And we can see there is a racial component to it. If we look at the ratio, marriage to divorce rate, for whites, it's about 2, a little over 2. The blacks are having a terrible difficulty with the ratio. Hispanics is it's a little bit lower than whites, but look at the other, or other often meaning Orientals and they have a substantially better, at least 50% better than whites ratio of marriage to divorce. Okay, then here's this is just data from the 25 to 40-year-olds. And you figure, there should be a pretty high percentage of people in this age group that are married, if you just kind of logically think of what you know. But the left is the female, the right is the males. We'll pick on the ladies again. Notice there's a difference. The 3 bars for less than 4 years of college for the 3 bars with more than 4 years of college. And surprisingly enough, look at those 3 bars on the far left. There's the biggest bar is actually not married and not cohabiting. Sleeping single in a double bed, as country song went. Cohabiting, that's a fairly high number. It's almost 20%, and married about 40%. So that's interesting. But then as ladies get a college degree, look at the marriage percentage. It goes up rather dramatically. the cohabiting rate drops down, and the not married is still a pretty high number. If there's anything surprising about our society today, it's the fact that so many people aren't getting married. A majority of people in their 20s, if you collect a whole room full of people in their 20s of all educational levels, you'll find significantly more not married than are married. So interesting. All right, here's the cohabiting plotted by year. And the blue line is the median age of first-time brides. And we can see that number has moved up from the, Alice and I got married in 74, and it's moved up from, yeah, it's moved up quite a few years. And look at the cohabitation rate. I know when Alice and I got married, it was pretty frowned upon to cohabit. The minority by far were in the cohabit range. Now, I was out at Raytheon in about 2010, and I was talking to a fellow that was LDS, and I was very surprised. He said, "I wouldn't think of getting married without living with him beforehand." And that opinion is very, very high among the younger generation. So the data says a lot. Of course, the church viewpoint, you can laugh at these or cry at these. Can Christians go to heaven if they live in sin? How do you respond to an adult child living in sin? And again, the cohabitation rate, it is highest with those who have a non-religious upbringing. And then we see the Catholic and the mainline Protestant and the evangelical rates, and they're not too much different than one another. Interestingly enough, the non-Christian religions are the lowest in terms of cohabitation. So that's rather interesting. Again, marriage and cohabiting. The data actually shows the effect of cohabitation on marriage is significantly significant. They said if you live together before you get married, it actually shown to increase your divorce probability by about 15%. But they say the biggest effect religion has on marriage stability is more about relationship choices before marriage. The fact that a gal did get married rather than getting in multiple cohabiting relationships. There's the word now that friends with benefits. You've probably heard of that. Okay. Again, divorce is not constant by country. The red colored countries mean the divorce rate is higher. And here's how the, yeah, this is real quick. Yeah, and it's Russia, Guam, Moldova, Belarus, Ukraine, Latvia, Kazakhstan, the Beatles back in the USSR, Soviet, and the satellite countries are have real high divorce rates. So maybe being a commie is not good for marriage now. Yeah, they're not too far apart. Let's look at the raw data. The Maldives, that's an island out in the Indian Ocean, has the highest one. But Kazakhstan, Russia, Belarus, Moldova, and the United States, a 2.7 rate. Russia is a 3.9 rate. So they're at least 50% higher. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting. Okay. Some other data on divorce. People who wait to marry or cohabit until they are over age 23 are less likely to divorce. If you attended college, the risk of divorce decreases by 13%. Having a baby after getting married, your risk of divorce decreases. Interesting. Maybe it's you're less likely to divorce if you've got a decent income. I think that's a scene from Porgy and Bess, and there's no question that economic pressure has is terrible for a marriage. And if your parents are happily married, your risk of divorce decreases by 14%. Okay, now we're going to get into religious groups struggle with divorce. Interestingly enough, though, Brad Wilcox, a sociologist at the University of Virginia, and a very Christian guy, says active conservative Protestants, and that's a fairly confined category, it's not all of Christendom, who regularly attend church are 35% less likely to divorce. Well, now here's the one that's hard to explain, but the nominally attending conservative Protestants are 20% more likely to divorce. Can't explain it all for whatever. Okay, where do churches get into the most conflict with the subject of divorce? And the answer is the ones that have the more rules and regulations dealing with it. A lot of churches say, let's just kind of, let's not put our nose into the bedrooms of America and the private lives of America. Let's stick with a different kind of message. But the Catholic Church, of course, has at least seven major sacraments. And of course, one of the sacraments is matrimony. And the wording is matrimony, the sealing of a man and a woman in unbreakable bond of marriage. If you want to do a good homework assignment for this class, write down this YouTube address. This is a young, I think he's a Franciscan Catholic friar, but he goes through some of the things and transitions of the Catholic Church in the last 40, 50 years relative to marriage and divorce. And it's a tough subject because the Catholic Church has changed a tremendous amount since 1960. They're not maybe where we'd like them to be, or maybe where they'd like to be, but they have opened up a great deal on this subject. As the friar said in this YouTube, these days, the idea of a Catholic marrying a non-Catholic is fairly commonplace. Yeah, one of the best men in our wedding was a Jewish fella, and he was marrying a very strong Catholic girl. And they had a horrific time trying to find clergy on both sides that would pull together some kind of ceremony. Yeah, this was also a book that came out around 1969. It was also reissued by Father James Kavanaugh, and it's a book worth reading. And I actually read that book as a senior in high school. But I would encourage people to look up this YouTube and watch it. It's enlightening. So again, we have to be careful when we study the Catholic Church. It has transitioned a great deal. Divorce, in their opinion, is not a sin that should keep a divorced Catholic from receiving the sacraments. Divorced person is not excommunicated and still a Catholic in good standing. However, you can get excommunicated if you divorce and then remarry without going through an annulment process. So there's the hidden catch. You got to get an annulment. And therein lies the kicker. There's a lot of people that are going through the pain of a divorce. They want to get an annulment, and they're told they almost have to go through a trial. They're going to show up to church in front of a tribunal and a panel and get intensely interviewed about their personal life and fine details of their intimacy and their marriage. And that often hits them pretty hard. Before a divorced person can remarry in the Catholic Church, you got to get an annulment. The annulment doesn't mean a marriage never take place, but they say it declares that a sacramental marriage did not take place.
What's that?
And again, you almost need a lawyer to handle the some of the rules. Well, the next one says, and this is their publication. This does not mean the children of marriage are illegitimate or the couple was living in sin. How's this for a lawyer? Sneaky explanation. It means that the marrying couple had little or no idea what Christian marriage was all about, or that there were deep problems from the beginning of the marriage, either in the couple's relationship or in their families of origin. So this looks like a great career for a lawyer to try to untangle all that stuff. So they say, therefore, the church may determine that it was impossible for the couple to have established a truly Christian sacramental marriage. So bring on the lawyers. Okay.
So is it easier? Which version?
Well, relative to the cartoon, how much justice can you afford? The answer is probably yes. Okay. So the Catholic Church, of course, its problem children are places like the United States, where the annulment rate is much, much higher. Notice it's almost non-existent or extremely low in places like Mexico, Brazil, Italy, Poland, although there are some other areas of the world that are coming up. But the U.S. is kind of the problem child for the Catholic Church dealing with divorce.
So really had central and south.
Hmm.
Are those
Mhm.
who are
Yeah.
divorced. And they're predominantly.
Right. And often, yeah, among many Hispanics, marriage is treated much more sacred and less uh, volatile. Okay, 2016, Pope Francis declared it the Holy Year of Mercy. He issued an exhortation on marriage to ease the way for divorced and remarried Catholics to rejoin the faith. So he did issue a statement where they're trying to make the annulment easier to do, faster and easier. They're giving more liberty to the individual parishes to grant communion to remarried divorcees. And this is an issue that divides the conservative and progressive wings of the Catholic Church a whole lot in America. Currently, the church officially excludes Catholics who have divorced and remarried from receiving communion without an annulment. So interesting. But again, the Pope Francis too is way more progressive. He's definitely moving the needle in the progressive, shall we say, direction. Here's a educational thing. They're trying to do a better job on educating within the Catholic faith and for every faith, really. Notice these are Catholic links on marriage recommendations. It's not your spouse's job to give you happily ever after. Marriage is a rewarding thing, but also difficult. Your happiness is also your responsibility. Your happiness does not depend solely on your spouse. Children are the most rewarding thing. Your spouse will change. They're supposed to. They will grow and mature. It's part of it. The Catholic Church is starting to, come around. Did anybody see The Graduate? Hoffman? Yeah, there's that wild scene at the end where he breaks up a marriage and the classic scene. Yeah, the cross. A wedding officiated by the state or another faith outside of the Catholic Church is not recognized as a valid marriage. So they don't consider a marriage outside of their faith as a sacramental marriage. It's a legal marriage, and it's a marriage in some kind of limbo status. But you've got to get, if you're a Catholic and you marry outside the faith, you've got to get a convalidation ceremony to try to get your marriage brought up, at least, yeah, into that sacramental range.
12, and you have
Yeah, yeah. It just brings it up to the sacrament level. Yeah. Okay, so within the Catholic Church, then, the teaching is that a marriage may only be between one man and one woman, with each partner's free and willing. But you got to read the fine print too. It also says willing consent and for the transmission of human life. That means they say getting married gives you kind of a responsibility to reproduce and spawn. Yeah. So the church believes adultery, divorce, remarriage after divorce, marriage without the intent to transmit life, polygamy, incest, child abuse, free union, and trial marriage are sins. They also say the church believes that chastity must be practiced by spouses and that sins against chastity include lust, masturbation, fornication, pornography, yeah, prostitution, rape. So the rules are pretty tight. Then comes marrying outside the faith. This is one area that has loosened up a great deal in the last couple decades. They are permitted to marry non-Catholic Christians. They didn't say non-Catholic Muslims or some other, if they receive a dispensation from a competent authority, usually the Catholic's local ordinary. It's a local ordinary. So some folks within their own diocese. And it's again seen as a sacrament. Weddings in which both parties are Catholic Christians are usually ordinarily held in the Catholic Church, while weddings in which one is Catholic and the other is a non-Catholic Christian can still be held in the church. Okay. And they have eased up on this one, and I heard a lot about this one as a kid because I knew particularly some men that had married Catholic gals. You basically had a signing agreement saying the kids will be taken to the Catholic Church. They will be, brought up Catholic. Now they've loosened up that writing. They don't have. I don't think they have to sign. They tell them now that the Catholic partner is told to do what is in their power to share their faith with the kids and undertake to remove dangers to defecting, do all in their power, but they don't tie down the non-Catholic person, put them in handcuffs and put them in the torture thing until they sign the form. And this I heard about quite a bit as a kid growing up in Western Cincinnati. Mhm, mhm. Go ahead.
Phrase it right. So going back to the idea of once you're married, is that one of the reasons why Catholics don't oppose birth control? Is that there's an implicit demand that if you are not engaging in sexual relations inside the marriage with the explicit purpose of procreation, therefore you should, even within the confines of marriage, so they don't discourage sex within a marriage.
No,
Just because you decided you're doing it for love and entertainment purposes.
right, yeah. Their wording is on this slide,
Good. Asking each student to get used
It-
to.
they say that sexual relations should be for procreative and unitive purposes. Now, obviously, if you're 75 years old,
Yeah.
procreation is not, yeah, probably not going to happen. And of course, it brings up some sticky issues like, what do you do if you've already got 9 kids? And yeah, you stop having sex because, yeah,
You don't want
they
another kid.
ignore birth control because maybe 10 would be better, that thinking. So it's, again, it's a case where theology and church kind of, it's hard against the, I call it the reality of human existence and our normal human nature. Sexual acts cannot be isolated from the primary end of procreation. But in parentheses, this doesn't mean that spouses can only have sex if they're trying to have a baby. Neither can sexual acts be isolated from their unitive meaning, which is subjectively possible only in marriage. So again, bring on the lawyer. Is it unitive? Is it procreative? Do you have to have both? Yeah, it's an interesting one there.
Thank God for that.
Okay, contraception. 68, Pope Paul VI issued his letter, which re-emphasized the church's teaching that it's intrinsically wrong to use contraception to prevent new human beings from coming into existence. And, contraception is any act which either in anticipation of sex or its accomplishment, this is, yeah, basically it pretty much knocks down just about anything.
In person, so every day,
Mhm.
also something where
I'm certainly not an expert on the sexual directives of most of the faiths, but yeah, certainly in the I've not heard of the LDS having any anti-contraception, nor have I heard the Jewish faith. Of course, when we say the Jewish faith, there's a tremendous spectrum there and a huge difference between the Reformed and conservative. But they've had, we'll have a slide on the they've actually slide on Methodist. Yeah, yeah. One of the things we get from this is when any church or religion moves into the realm of sexuality, marriage, divorce, in a certain sense, you're kind of walking on thin ice. You want to get into some dissension and confusion and whatever. Put in more rules in your book of doctrine relative to these issues. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Let's see how we're doing on time. The Judaism view on divorce. Again, there's a bit of difference between the more strict Hasidic Judaism and the Reformed. But in general, Judaism has always viewed marriage and the rearing of children as essential for personal gratification and the fulfillment of one's communal obligations. Still, Jewish tradition entertains no illusions about the possibility of strife within marriage. Therefore, divorce, while not encouraged, is not deemed sinful or forbidden, but rather a sad, occasionally necessary solution to an unhappy marital relation. So the Jewish faith in general has always been, divorce is a sad, unhappy we're sorry it happens, but they don't try to pretend, come down with a sword of judgment and smash the people who have experienced it or are having marital difficulties. They've realized it is a human feature. Jewish law never accorded Jewish women full parity for suing and divorce. Now, they haven't had a problem there. Men are told to give their wife a get before she may remarry.
What's that?
It's kind of like a teacher that gives you a get out of class permit. So, okay, you've got it. Okay, you want away from me. I'm gonna give you a hall pass to get out of this. No, so it still has that, as the Jewish faith does, have that patriarchal slant. But they basically feel like divorce is a civil matter. Although the Reform Jew is the only Jewish type in the United States that does not require the issuing of a get. Yeah. Yeah.
And I can even argue that in the Catholic.
Mhm. Mhm.
And those are what's made.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's why I really come in. And so it's really hard. Because it's just not all.
Well, I mean, Christ's actual teaching on this issue, that actually is far more strictly related to divorce than anything an Orthodox Jew is talking about. And which is, I assume that's where the Catholics derive their conservatism. Other than infidelity, basically said, once married, done. And you can't divorce. And, you know, so at least they still have allowed divorce. It's just that there's some requirements that sound a little bit patriarchal and one-sided, but Jesus's teachings, then you're going to go back that the Mosaic law is upended.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
the divorce process. Right? You know,
Mhm.
there was a
Mhm.
and so I do. You know what I mean? Really, really. Difficult. You know what I mean? So it's- suffering and food and, you know, it's just like, you know what I mean?
No, no, really.
One last comment.
Yeah.
And the police and the church especially has a preference for the male power and also does not give women genders the work. For that, I mean, I'm saying that we can process. Sometimes, especially in this, it's unfairly, and many of it's years and maybe years. I really feel that, and Ron, you mentioned this, there is a women.
We're all brothers. But there's no power dynamic. That assumes everybody's going. The reality is, they're not. You know what I mean? And women, 90% of the time are the ones who get destroyed in that state. And it's so bad that they're even afraid to come out and say it. If you ever join an organization and an interview process, and they say, well, I want you signing contracts with agreements. The process started from before the mandate. And their long-term, development of the individual woman. But the one thing, the stick that is that the rules have. And that dehumanizes. So, layperson. All the ministers. Monitoring the right to live. Anyway, we were approached by a. Then the church is to celebrate and sanctify.
Huh.
Death, marriage. And divorce.
How about a big lottery win?
And the same reason why this lady wanted. We should have all these rules, right? Like, we want this. You make an involvement in some fiction, right? You make some rules. Right? That's what. But what do you do? I mean, like, that's why this stuff is. We want it. We don't know what to do. We gotta go back to the church. Everybody's going, oh. Well, Jerry, it makes sense. Except. We go with our feet. As opposed to our hearts. This is what I admire. They say we can go with your feet, but you can't. That's how we can't. That's how it is. So I mean, because they understand that in a way, the rules are very good. This is what this is. If you want to be in this community, this is how I'm doing myself. You know, is a Catholic person, what that really means in your heart is if you're walking only memorize knowledge. Not. There was this idea. People the option to vote with it. It gave them a call.
This is actually our last slide, and this talks about the LDS, Latter-day Saint teaching on marriage, and they're kind of unique in that they believe they could go through those temple sealing ceremonies. There's of course a temple not too far from here, but they believe in binding couples for all time and eternity, with the theological teaching that you will go off and to your own planet with your family, populate that planet, and you'll be with your spouse and the family forever and ever and ever. So they call that the eternal sealing, and only the president of the church can cancel the sealing. But despite it all, they're human too, and the data indicate about 26% of LDS and non-LDS have experienced a divorce. And about 1/3 of recent LDS marriages will end in divorce, compared to the US average right now, running 50 or 60%. They teach that there's different degrees of heaven. There are 3 heavens, and to get to the highest level of heaven, you've got to be married. I think you got to have children, but you certainly have to reach an extending hand to your spouse and pull them up the ladder to that higher level. 144,000 is Jehovah's Witnesses, but they have degrees of heaven, and in their Doctrine and Covenants it says you can enter one of the lower heavens, but at the end of this, you cannot get up to the top notch until you have a spouse and I think some children also. So. Good.
All of this, though, what you just described, though, is derived from Joseph Smith's interpretation. Where he got this message right. This is not derived from the gospel at all.
That is correct. Yeah.
So they got the whole.
Yeah. The Mormon faith has the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price, I think, another document, and the Bible, and they kind of blend them together. Interesting though, the Mormons do have the lowest rate of intermarriage of any other religion in America. In America, in general, they say about 1 in 3 marriages is now interfaith. With Mormons, it's only 1 in 9. The Mormon Church strongly encourages their flock to only date other Mormons and to also marry inside the fold. They really, really frown upon dating or marrying outside of their faith. They believe that God lives near, that the throne of God is near a planet out there called Kolob, not Kolob itself, but the planet, that's the planet that's roughly nearest to the throne of God. So they've got a touch of Scientology, shall we say. Yeah. I'll add that to my lesson on the James Webb Space Telescope.
I mean, they're positing a physical location. Hey, that thing's got good pictures, it may say. I wouldn't get surprised because then it would be like, here it is. No longer be a mystery.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't.
Talking to some pastors in the Methodist faith, I remember in Oak Ridge talking to one pastor, and he said, one of the biggest struggles we have is that a lot of the problems that arise within our church are marital strife issues. And he said, personally, I feel very, very unqualified to be a marriage counselor. And I know the Methodist Church in Oak Ridge actually hired someone explicitly whose major focus was being a professional counselor, particularly toward family and marital relations. And I've heard small church pastors, particularly of many different faiths, say, you know, when I got into this business, I so many of the people that come to me with marital and family issues, and I'm very, very unequipped to deal with them effectively.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Senior pastor, are you supposed to be?
Okay.
I just wanted to ask you.
All right. How are we doing? Well, we've just about run out of time. I want to also add this. You know, I do a lot of subjects. I'm all over the place. And I do better at some than others. This is not my, you know, niche. I try to prepare and do some interesting stuff, but sometimes I step into areas where I shouldn't walk in minefields. I don't belong. But we try. Okay.
Um, Living laws, such as sickness, medical insurance, you have people that, medical industry. Definitely. It's unbelievably, have a whole concept of ownership, where each one owns all of the stuff. That concept only. Yeah. That makes sense.
But you have to incorporate that.
As far as any institution, anything that is created, that happens to a family. That usually goes to
Basically. Leadership and I think.
Mhm.
The rest of it is. And you're right, sometimes you don't have good representation. There's no.
really, really hard. You know, it's all of these.
Or is that something that-
Special counsel, yeah.
Yeah. Hard going through this. When people come to me, regardless of what they're coming in about, if I see it's the promotional. And so there's. And sometimes that may mean we can only do budgeting. And I don't insist, right? 1 month,
Mhm.
and then after that. Because you were not trying to be considerate.
Point contact.
Here, what we do is we don't have a specific person, as much as we have a list of resources. We can do it. And I know it's. I think that's the key, right? If you're going to pay a 14%, then the very easy to get a list of resources together to remove three. Right? And help people go to And that's my opinion. Hurt, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're going